as I said, it is the Omer, it is acknowledging Jackie Robinson, it is Yom HaAtzmaut, it's also Ramadan. And so if you cross paths with someone from the Muslim community, please give them a greeting and acknowledge this holy month in their tradition. This week, as we observe the 73rd birthday of the modern state of Israel, it really is something incredible to behold. I offer to you in the chat, if you would, you are more than welcome to. Sure, we can have a picture of Jerusalem behind me. That in the chat, I am curious, as we are here on this Yom HaAtzmaut, first of all, how many of you have been to Israel? So if you have been to Israel, feel free to chat and say, me, count me, or yes. While you're doing that, I am curious of how many of you can name a favorite place that you have been. Think about your trips to Israel, that time you have spent there. Where was that one place, whether it was a historical place, a spiritual place, a culinary place, a natural place, that is a favorite place that you have visited in Israel? And so I am curious to see some of those different responses. And as you start to type those in, I am actually going to pull up something through my computer. And it's going to take a little bit of Zoom wizardry here, but I'm going to be doing a screen share. And it's just a minute and a half.
Can't hear you.
I share that video with you as I see some of your responses. Kibbutz Hagoshrim, yes, that is beautiful. Cantor, Kikor Hatulim. Thank you, Cantor Keel. She likes it because the cats. Oh, she likes it because of the restaurants. The Western Wall, Marla says, too many favorite places to choose. The Bronstein say Jerusalem, our apartment in Rehov Ramban and Tel Dan. I had to look. Hi, Jill. Masada, Beersheba and the Wailing Wall, the Dome of the Rock, the Bullet Factory, which is in Rehovot, Masada, the Western Wall, the Dead Sea, and Sfat, which is also a beautiful place. As you share some of those places that you have been. And it's interesting, some of them are sites, some of them are places of natural beauty, some of them are personal memories, as you hear Cantor and my family and Cantor sharing those places where we spent considerable amounts of time. I share that with those, I asked that question of you, and I share that video with you because that video shows Israel as an Or Lagoyim. It really does show how Israel is a light to the nations. If you think about what has transpired over the last 100 years, and especially in the last 73 years, what Israel has done, this modern state of Israel, in terms of offering a place for people to come express their faith and religion in Jerusalem, whether they are Jewish or Muslim or Christian, whether you look at all of the places of natural environment that have been taken care of, that have been brought forward by the Israel Park Service. You think about all of the inventions, all of the science, our cell phones, our computers, medical technology, the creativity, the sense of ein brera, that there is no choice, we're just going to solve the problem. And ultimately, what is the most important thing about Israel? What have they brought to the world? Incredible culinary delights. They didn't invent falafel, but man, they made falafel something special. Shakshuka, barekas. I mean, about the only thing that Israel doesn't have is a good New York bagel. And look, I say that somewhat facetious. If you've ever been on a trip to Israel with me, you would know I tell people I'm only going for the food, which is kind of true, but also kind of not true. I fully admit I go for all of the spiritual and historical reasons as well, but whoa, the food is good. Mushy ice cream. Oh. Crembo. Bamba. Ah. Israel is an astounding and incredible place. It is a crossroads where three continents meet. That is the place. And I showed that to you because that short video in a minute and a half just at the Western Wall, it shows all of those places, that it's a place of faith, it's a place of all ages, it's a place of prayer. But if you looked at the very end, they flashed, it's also a place of controversy. It says, here's a flashpoint of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict as you have the Dome of the Rock above and the Western Wall below. And that has been a place of violence. It's been a place of war. It has been a place of protest. But you also then had the very end where it was talking about some of the other challenges and difficulties in Jewish life in Israel. There are groups like the Women of the Wall who have gone to the Western Wall, which is separated by gender, rigidly separated by gender, and groups of women have gone there to try to read Torah. They showed, like the beginning of one of those protests, they didn't show you the next step, which is when ultra-Orthodox Jews started throwing chairs and rocks and prayer books and spitting, and police came in and arrested some of those women. Israel is a challenging place. As much as I say that Israel is truly an Or Lagoyim, a light to the nations, for all of those wonderful things that it has done in its 73 years of existence, and even before that, there are real challenges. It's easy to see some of those brokenness. You don't have to look very hard. And as we celebrate Yom HaAtzmaut, Israel's Independence Day, we can't just look at the positive. We can't just look at the sparks of holiness. We have to think about those brokennesses. What has happened and how minorities, whether it's minorities of race or religion or gender, are treated. There have been attacks on the LGBTQ community. How Israel has dealt with its neighbors. It has not done well with Lebanon and Syria and Jordan and Egypt and all around the Middle East. There have been moments where it has worked, but there have been a lot more moments of violence and bloodshed. We could talk for hours, centuries, it feels, about the West Bank and Gaza and the relationship with the Palestinians. There have been protests in the last number of years because of socioeconomic crisis. People can't afford to buy homes. They can't afford to buy cream cheese or sour cream and yogurt. Basic produce has gotten expensive. There are incredible challenges with refugees. People coming out of Sudan, walking across Egypt and Eritrea, and they are getting sent back because we can't have people that look like that or talk like that or Muslims coming into our country. There are challenges with guest workers, people that have come in from Asia to work in Israel in lots of different ways and then have all kinds of problems. It is a long list of real challenges that Israel faces. And if you go to any college campus, it is not hard, or lots of places, to find those fracture points, those places of brokenness where not everybody is celebrating Israel as the most wonderful place on earth. There are sparks of holiness, but those challenges are tremendous. And yet, I was thinking about what did I want to say about Israel. And every time I got to a moment of celebration, blessing, one of those challenges, broken pieces of brokenness would come up and say, Michael, you have to be careful about praising Israel because Israel has difficulties and challenges. And yet, in that video where I was telling you about the women trying to just read Torah, something we take for granted in our Reform and modern settings, there in Israel, when a woman reads Torah in public, it starts a riot and the woman gets arrested. Urine is thrown at them, spit. But it's awful what happens because a woman reads Torah. Orthodox Jews attacking other Jews. It's awful. And yet, one of the people mentioned in that video, or actually, excuse me, she's not mentioned in that video, but she is part of these group, part and parcel of Women in the Wall and these groups of women that are trying to say women have a place in Judaism. She was being arrested. I was asking Cantor before the service. I said, I know Anat Hoffman has been arrested and recently, and she said, well, which time? I think she's also now involved in the Israeli government because that's how incredible Israel is. And we've actually heard her speak. If you've been on one of our trips to Israel, she was one of our speakers, I'm almost certain. Anat Hoffman, who has been arrested for disturbing the peace, her disturbance of the peace was reading Torah. It was her words of prayer. If you saw the silent meditation, it was her words of prayer. Here's a woman that has been arrested, who's been attacked, who is a symbol, is a focus of some of the deepest brokenness in Israel, and yet it was her prayer for Israel and its future that caught my attention. I share it with you once again. Eli, my God, in this sacred moment, give us hope for Israel and her future. Renew our wonder at the miracle of the Jewish state. In the name of the pioneers who made the deserts bloom, give us tools to cultivate a diversity of Jewish expression in Israel. In the name of our fallen soldiers, give us courage to stand up to the words and ways of zealots, those in our midst and those among our neighbors. In the name of the Israeli inventors who have amazed the world with their innovations, help us apply that same ingenuity to finding a path of peace. In the name of all of these individuals, grant us the strength to conquer doubt and despair in Israel, replacing doubt with action, replacing despair with hope, and let us say, Amen. If Anat Hoffman, who has faced Israel sometimes at its worst, can bring us that blessing, let us hear it, take it to heart, And think of the ways that we here in Vero Beach in Indian River County in the United States of America can reach out, can connect with the state of Israel, whether it is on trips, whether it is getting trees and supporting the environmental programs at Kibbutz Lotan, whether it's reaching out to an organization like Lifeline for the elderly, or engaging in dialogue with our friend congregations in Israel. Let us each, in conscious, powerful, meaningful ways, not just love Israel from afar, not just send thoughts and prayers, but think of the actions that we can take that match and pace these words, these prayers of Anat Hoffman, so that Israel, that place that wrestles with how to be the best of its kind in the world, that place that is a home for Jews, let us send not just blessings, not just love, not just light, but find ways of bringing action and celebrating this birthday of Israel. Amen. Shabbat Shalom.